talk about the parenting issue because I see a lot young boys being raised in a way that is going to produce problematic men. And one of the things I noticed quite a bit was that boys were very often punished for showing any emotion or expressing any emotion that wasn't related to anger or aggression. And for a lot of those boys, I watched as they slowly learned to process every emotion they felt through anger and aggression until that was the only thing that they had. And is it any wonder at that point that those young boys grow up into men who do not know how to process emotion any other way?
Yeah, as a man who does that personally, I don't get why, like, whenever men cry, other men call us, am I allowed to say, they call us wimps. That's the gentle word I can use. They make fun of us. They mock us. They make us feel like our emotions and our tears are something to be ashamed of. And I will never understand that. I'm a Cancer. All right. I'm a crybaby. You put on Titanic, Land Before Time, any sad movie like that, I'm over there like, oh, but lately I find myself, even when I'm alone, even when there's no one around and I'm just by myself and I see a sad scene, I'll start to feel it kind of come up and then I'll like suck it back in. And I don't get why. It's like I'm pre-programmed to not be allowed to feel emotions. And I don't get why men are taught this. It sucks, man. It really sucks holding that in. Sometimes I just want to let it out.
Yeah, and the sad thing that gets me is that it's not just other men, right? Like, you kind of expect that from other men because they've been socialized the same way. But I see women doing this to their young boys. I see women doing this to their boyfriends or their husbands as well because of that internalized misogyny, right? I was just having a conversation just the other day about someone who was saying that, when he was in his early 20s, his best friend from childhood unalived from cancer. And he cried about it. And when he cried about it, his girlfriend stopped being attracted to him and left him.
I've heard stories like that.
I've watched that happen.
Yeah, so this is a thing that women are also perpetuating.
That's ridiculous.
Well, it's that internalized misogyny, right?
I want a man who's sensitive and in touch with his feelings. I want a man who's going to care. But if he starts crying, I'm out. Like, really?
No, because I literally genuinely would not care. I would let a dude freaking soak the hell out of my shirt to the point where I'd have to change it.
Yeah,
Ladies,
absolutely. This is not all women we're talking about. It's not even a majority of women.
Oh, I know, yeah.
But it's just to say that there are women also perpetuating this.
But ladies, seriously, listen to me when I tell you this. If you have a man that cries in your presence, take that as the biggest form of compliment, because that means that he is willing to let down his guard and show you his vulnerable side, something that somewhere deep down even he is ashamed of, the fact that it's even there. So if he's so comfortable in your presence that he's showing you his tears, trust me, that is a marriage proposal.
Yeah, then I get the shit beat out of me by my ex, so I'm passing on that.
Oh, okay, well, maybe we can do without that last part. Jeez, that's not okay. Yeah, that's no bueno.
Some men psycho cry too. I don't know. It's all dependent.
Yeah, rage tears are a thing.
Yeah.
But you have to, I don't know. I look at it from this really weird perspective because I was in an abusive marriage for quite some time. And I look at this man that I was with, and I'm distanced enough from it now that I can feel a little bit of empathy for him. That's not to condone or say that anything he did was okay, because it wasn't. But I can see how it developed, and I can see how he got where he did, right? Like, his father was very much that way. There were moments of self-awareness he would have where, he would hear his father talking a certain way and he would tear up and go, is that what I sound like? And I can look and I can see those things. I can see how when the abuse got really bad, it was at a point where he was questioning his masculinity, right? He had lost his job. He couldn't work. And so the way for him to feel like a man in that situation was to become aggressive and abusive. None of those things are okay. But knowing the cause, knowing what triggers those things gives us something that as a society we can work on to sort of start changing that perception and saying, hey, there are other ways to be masculine. There are other ways to be manly. You don't need to rely on these things, right? And that sort of lets us work at the problem from a different angle.
And one thing I think it teaches men, and I could be totally off base here. This is just a thought that just popped into my head. Maybe because these men think, oh, well, emotion is bad. I have to be strong. I have to be aggressive. Maybe they think this alpha male men are stronger and better than women. Maybe maybe it distorts in their head somehow. They think that's the only right way to be, that you're not a man unless you're dominating a woman, grabbing a woman by her hair and dragging her by her hair, caveman style, And that's a really bad what's the word I'm thinking of? It's 3 a.m. I can't think of the word. That's a bad way of seeing it. Like, that's not the way to be a man.
Yeah, and it's hard too because being a man is so tied into men's identities. It's tied into their self-worth. right? Whereas like being feminine isn't tied into my self-worth. If I'm not feminine, that doesn't devalue me at all to myself. But for a lot of men, feeling like they're not masculine or not masculine enough does in fact devalue their self-worth and make them feel worthless. And so, we can kind of start to work on that perception. And the thing is, when you talk about patriarchy, it hurts. It's aimed at women, obviously, but it hurts everybody. And there are a lot of ways in which it hurts men specifically, right? Men's mental health is in the toilet. Their self-unaliving rates are way higher. And it's because when you have that much power, it comes with extra responsibility. And so there's a lot that ends up being on their shoulders that shouldn't be, but because they want the power, right? They take it. They take that responsibility for themselves.
Exactly. And in no way, obviously, are we saying that justifies how certain men choose to abuse women, but maybe there's something wired wrong in their head that, because if they don't see what's wrong with the way they treat women, then either they're just insane or there's something wrong with the wiring in their head that's making them think, oh, this is an acceptable way to be. So let's trace it back to its roots and try to figure out what's beneath that and try to figure out what is causing these thoughts to be acceptable in the brain, that they think this is the way I'm supposed to be. This is the kind of person I should be.
Exactly. Like, this is not a justification. There is no justification.
Not at all.
The point of recognizing these things is to say that a lot of the men who are, and this is a harsh thing to say, but a lot of the men who are currently adults are a lost cause in terms of what we can do to change those behaviors, those thought patterns, and those actions. Because in order for real change to take place, they have to want it to take place, right?
Exactly. You have to make the conscious decision to choose to be better.
Right.
Like I was saying.
They're, as far as I'm concerned, not even where I put my focus. My focus is on the next generation of men. And if I can recognize what's going on with the current generation of men, how they got to where they are, then we can focus on what we need to change for the next generation so they grow up differently.
Yeah. And not to sound egotistical, but I'm the perfect example because, like I said, when I was a boy, that's when my dad just started teaching me. He always taught me, treat women like princesses. Don't ever put your hands on a woman in anger. Always treat them like they're the treasure of the world. And that's the things that he taught me while he was still here. And after he was gone, those were the ideals that I grabbed onto and took to heart. So I was taught that very, very young. And a lot of the problem is a lot of boys these days aren't being taught that. They watch, all these movies and listen to this music like people were talking about, slap women, treat them like hoes, blah, 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 all this stuff. That's what they're being taught now. So they think, okay, those are the ideas I'm going to latch onto. Those are the ideas and behaviors that I'm going to learn as a child. And it's going to evolve when I become an adult. And now this is who I am. So yeah, I agree 1,000,000% that it needs to be taught as young as humanly possible for it to really stick. I mean, adults can learn, but the sooner you start those ideas, the better they're going to take hold.
Yeah. Can I push back just a teensy bit on one of those concepts? The idea of treating women like they're princesses or that I think is a little bit problematic in and of itself. Certainly it's better than, teaching disrespect, but ultimately it still isn't viewing them as human. It still isn't viewing them as just people. And one of the things I see a lot, because I do some like volunteer work with like abuse situations and stuff, but one of the things I see a lot is men who put women on this pedestal of being pure and good and princesses and, whatever. And then the second she becomes human in their eyes, it's like she fell from grace.
Right.
They can't reconcile the fact that she makes mistakes, that she's human, that she's not perfect and pure and good. And that causes this like switch flip of where they almost feel like you lied to me.
Yeah. No, I like how you put that because I feel like that ties into, in my opinion, one of the number one reasons for divorce in this country, why divorce is so high, is people, they fall in love, they're in the honeymoon phase, like, oh my God, I love you, I love everything about you, when they don't even really know that person, not really know that person. You don't really know someone until you lived with them, you spent a long time around them, and like, oh my God, everything's so perfect, this is the best marriage ever, and then you find out, this person has a flaw of some kind. I'm not going to name any specifics because I don't want to offend anybody because I'm just joking, but they find out, this person has a flaw or two. Oh my God, this isn't what I signed up for, I'm out of here. Now, obviously, if the other person is like something really extreme, like they're an abuser or something, but if it's something stupid and petty, like, they leave the door open while they're, or, just something dumb like that. People get divorced for all kinds of stupid reasons because they had this idea of who this person was. And, oh my God, the illusion is broken. This isn't the person I thought I was marrying or whatever. Yeah, I agree. But
yeah,
no one's perfect. Everyone has flaws. And we just have to learn.
Squeaks. The car door squeaks, so you throw out the whole car instead of oiling the hinge.
Yeah. Just put some oil on it. There's fixes for everything, or just ignore it. Me and my wife, we have disagreements. We argue about stuff all the time. There's one major, well, not major for us, but it would be major to somebody else. There's one thing politically we disagree on that if I mention it would probably set this live on fire. But we respect and love each other enough that we are allowed to feel different ways and not hate each other as enemies, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So,
I think the way in which couples argue is also important. Like, I think having arguments is important because if you're not having arguments, it means that somebody's needs aren't being met. Because you're two individual people, you're never going to be in sync 100% of the time.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. So if you're not having arguments occasionally, someone's needs aren't being met. But how you argue is important. Are you respectful when you argue with one another? Do you actually listen to one another, or are you listening to respond? Do you care more about getting yourselves back on track and, understanding what's going on than you do about being right? These are all, my husband and I argue quite a bit, but I can honestly say that even when things have gotten heated, maybe our voices have raised a little bit, not usually in anger, but usually just because we're passionate about what we're saying. There's never been insults thrown around. There's never been, this is my current husband, obviously. There's never been insults thrown around. There's never been speaking to one another disrespectfully. And if either of us starts to feel like we're getting emotionally elevated to the point where we might lose control, we do have we actually have, this is so funny, we have like a safe word for arguments.
I like that.
Yeah. So, because when you're really heated like that, when you're really angry, it's hard to verbalize and say, hey, I need a minute. But if you can get one word, and even if it gets too hard, we even have other like visual signals. Like have you seen those like octopus plushies that have like a happy face and a frowny face?
Yes, I love those things.
Yeah. He's autistic, and sometimes in an argument he will lose the ability to speak.
Okay.
And so sometimes he'll just go grab the plushie and turn it to the frowny face, and that means conversation needs to stop for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
He's going to go in the other room, and then he's going to come back, and we'll continue.
When you get that heated, it's almost like driving on ice. You lose your ability to stop and turn around and slow down. It's like, okay, after a certain point, okay, we're losing control now. Our momentum is just pushing us forward, and it's getting worse and worse. So yeah, I completely understand that.
Yeah, and one of the things we had to learn was never to argue in an enclosed space. Like, if an argument starts in the car, it stops until we get home. Because we can't sit and argue in the car, because neither of us can walk away from that.
One thing I like to take a break on is don't ever go to bed angry at each other. I don't care how bad the fight is. If you're going to bed, resolve that shit before you go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
That's one I like to try to, I live by.
Man, that's the reason my whole last previous relationship fell apart. Oh, the grass was always greener on the other side, and she never wanted to talk about anything. Or when I would she would need time alone and I give it to her, but vice versa, when I needed time alone, it was a problem. Or I'm not listening to her, I'm not communicating effectively. It's like, nah, you can't have it both ways, bro.
Yeah, communication, I absolutely have to say, absolutely number one, communication is the single most important thing you can have in any relationship, not just marriage.
You have to understand what that communication do. You can communicate till your freaking mouth falls off, but if there's no understanding, what happens?
I think communication and reciprocity.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
definitely.
Yeah, you need, and the reciprocity doesn't have to necessarily be exactly the same, right? Like, because we all have different strengths and weaknesses, right? So, what I give my husband is different from what he gives me, but there's still a give and take.
Yeah.
Right. I think my biggest problem was I've had not my previous ex, regardless of her issues, she was good to me till about the end of the relationship. Like most of it, I'd say it was about a 90-10 bad relationship. But I've had exes before that where they would literally argue me down, and I would cry begging them to leave me alone and just let me be, and they would keep going. And at one point, something just clicked in me. Something my grandma told me. She's like, it ain't worth hearing somebody yell at you and smack you while you're down. And I'm just laying it in my head. I grabbed my keys and I just left. And I started doing that from the get-go. I just started getting in my, if somebody's not going to respect me, I'm just going to get my car and leave. If you're not going to respect me and you're going to talk to me a certain way and abuse me, I'm out. End of story.
Yeah, and it's rough when you have two people in a relationship who have different means of coping, right? Because, and I'll use my own as an example, when there's an argument or there's a disagreement, I need to talk it through to be able to work through it. My husband needs space and time to process. So we have different needs in that argument, and we've had to kind of work out a system so that both of us get our needs met. Because otherwise, one of us isn't getting what we need from the argument, right? Because if he gets his space, then I'm not getting my time to verbally work it through. And if I get that, then he's not getting his space. So that's why we have that where we can take frequent breaks. And I had to learn to be a little bit more patient, right? I had to learn to say, hey, I'm having anxiety right now, that this is still in the air. but that's all it is anxiety, and I need to just sit with it and be comfortable with it. Or not necessarily comfortable with it, but I need to accept that I'm going to feel this way for a little bit. And then he needs to be able to say, hey, I may not be able to be fully engaged, but she needs to talk and I'm going to listen.
Right. If I'm
I have a marriage. Sorry, go
okay.
ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead, man.
Okay, who's going first?
You.
Okay. All right. Well, I was just going to say, see, I have a relationship. My marriage is like that, where it's two very different dynamics, particularly with our love language. See, I'm a very physical lover. Holding hands, kissing, hugging. Physical touch. That's my love language. That is very much not hers. But and for a long time, it made me question: does she actually love me? Like, seriously, does this woman even love me? She won't even hold my hand in public. She does love me, but I had to look a little bit harder because her love language is through doing acts. She, like, I remember, just a quick example. One time me and her had one of the worst arguments we ever had, but she cooked me steak, potatoes, green beans, like the whole thing. And she does things like that. She will do acts to show her love. She doesn't physically show it, but if you look at the way she behaves, the way, the things that she does, that's her love language. She shows it through the things that she does for me. So it took me a while to kind of start picking up on that. So if I'd given up too early, I would have screwed myself out of a fantastic situation. So yeah, sometimes, good or bad, the two languages can be very different. So sometimes you just have to dig a little bit deeper and listen a little bit harder, because sometimes it's there. You just have to look with a different set of eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very much the same with me and my husband. I'm the physical touch person. Yeah. And him, and part of this is autism, right? He's not a very touchy-feely kind of person. And there was a good part early on in our relationship where I was like, I don't know if he loves me, or if, like I he likes me. I know that, he enjoys my company, but like, is the love there? Is the passion there? And then I have an autoimmune disease. And when it kicked in, I got really, really sick. And when I say really sick, I mean, it was hard to get out of bed. I didn't have the strength to open my dresser drawers to get dressed in the morning. Yeah, it was really, really bad. I'm better now with medication and stuff, but it was really bad. And one day I broke down crying, and I told him all of this. Like it hurts to open the dresser drawers in the morning. It hurts to get dressed. It hurts all. And I woke up the next morning, and on my nightstand, I'm going to start crying thinking about it. On my nightstand was a pair of socks, a pair of underwear. There was a bottle of water. There was my medication. And then over next to the closet, so that I didn't have to open the closet door or anything, hanging up, was a shirt and a pair of pants for me. Because before he went to work, he laid out all my clothes so that I wouldn't have to bend down and open things. And that was the moment when I was like, I'm going to marry this man. Like, that was the moment.
I get it. Trust me, because I'm the same as you, and your husband is the same as my wife. So it kind of sounds like the same dynamic.